Welcome back to the Dry Fasting Club. I'm Yannick Wolf, and today we're going to be talking about the dangers of dry fasting that everyone should be aware of. While I believe that dry fasting may actually be safer than water fasting, especially anything under 5 days, going for really long fasts needs to be done carefully. Whenever you're fasting for extended periods of time, you need to take proper precautions. Today, we'll talk about specific contraindications, which means what diseases are not recommended to be dry fasted with. Personally, in drastic situations, I would still recommend some form of fasting. This could mean starting with really short timing windows of fasting, something like 1 meal a day or maybe short water fasts. You'll need to learn how to navigate them correctly and let your body adapt. What people need to understand is that healing your body is not a sprint. Those who try to sprint into it will make many more mistakes than those who approach it gradually and intelligently. We'll touch on things like dehydration, refeeding, gallstones, and cortisol levels, so strap yourselves in. Welcome to the Dry Fasting Club. Please remember that all fasting should be done with medical supervision. All information provided here should be viewed as informational only and should never supersede medical advice. When you are adding fasting or making lifestyle and dietary changes, please discuss with your medical professional first. There are many contraindications when it comes to dry fasting. Here's a list from Russian clinics. The most common ones to watch out for would be extremely lean and low BMI situations, stage 4 cancers, and diseases of the blood, heart, liver, and kidneys. Think about it. It doesn't take a genius to understand that a practice that encourages the blood to get thicker, as well as have detoxification skyrocket, you need functioning detox organs. If you already have some blood diseases that would get even more dangerous if the blood thickened, especially heart diseases, then it's a no-brainer. I say this, but I am aware that a lot of people come to dry fasting out of desperation. And in this desperation, you say things like, if I can't dry fast, there's nothing else that can help me. You hear all about the benefits and you're ready to take the risks. I can't stop you. I can only advise you. Water fasting may not be as strong, but it is definitely a safer option. You can check out many papers and the benefits of fasting for cancer, but most of these papers are focused on water fasting. If you're dead set on dry, then you have to take it as carefully as possible and make sure that you're monitoring yourself. Ideally, you would have medical monitoring during your dry fast so that you can really quantify your results and know when to stop. Grinding away with tiny dry fasts is always an option, and I'd be lying if it wasn't something that I myself would probably try first. But there are many anecdotal reports that if your disease is extremely late stage, like with many cancers, then the stress and burden of a dry fast will be too much for your already frail body. This is an unfortunate truth. This can apply to many late-stage diseases and severe cases. And for these, the best thing you can do is try to chip away at them with multiple smaller fasts. In some diseases, you may be symptomatic, for example with heart issues, but if every medical test says you're fine, then you may be a perfect candidate for dry fasting. Because in these scenarios, you're usually dealing with something that's more neurological and nervous system based. In these cases, you can push yourself a little bit more. Just remember, this is not a race. Your damage did not happen over the course of a few weeks. Stop thinking that you can fix it with only 1 or 2 fasts. Okay, now let's talk a bit about nutritional deficiencies. You need to refeed correctly because A, you need to slowly bring the digestive system back on track, and B, you need to refill your micro and macronutrients. In a worst case scenario, you may end up going too long with certain deficiencies and end up leaching minerals from your bones. You may also not be giving yourself enough time to refill your nutrients. Since the early few days of a refeed, the bile and your digestive enzymes are weaker, so you're not even digesting or absorbing the food as well as you should be. So if you keep jumping into fasts over and over too quickly, you may be running into hard deficiencies. This can cause a lot of stress and have a lot of downstream consequences. A very beneficial step to healing is making sure that you're constantly monitoring your vitamin levels to make sure that you're not deficient in any of them. Measuring your minerals is much more difficult, but you should still be thinking about them. Blood tests can also check for other health markers like thyroid health, cholesterol health, and hormonal health. Another nice thing to have is to perform tests that check for genetic mutations, like the MTHFR gene that deals with methylation in the body. Personally, though, I'm not a big fan. I can talk about it a little bit more if we ever get the chance to have a one-on-one. But if you're dead set on the MTHFR, a cheaper solution would be to request a panel that actually looks at your homocysteine levels. If they are high, you have a pretty big chance that your methylation pathways are impaired, and a methylated B vitamin might be all that you need. Oat tests, so the organic acid tests, are nice to try, but they're not very reliable, so it might be better to save your money. Hopefully, you've now made the connection that dry fasting is a very powerful tool, but it's only half of it. It's the deconstruction part. To play it safe, you'll need to pair it with a powerful reconstruction too, which means that nutrition is just as important, if not more. Okay, let's touch on some other topics like dehydration, gout, and cortisol. Dehydration affects a lot of things. You can expect things like dry mouth and insomnia the further you go. Your body is creating metabolic water, but you're still slowly going into a water deficit. These are both things that you'll just have to endure on your fast. There are some tips and tricks, but we're not going to be talking about them in this discussion. A common worry for people is gout flare-ups. I get a lot of gout-related questions during consults. Without going into too much detail, remember that uric acid and ketones compete for excretion in the body. So you should expect a gout flare-up when you're trying a ketogenic diet or fasting for the first time. But if you persist, you'll notice a huge quality of life improvement and much less flare-ups. Continue fasting and you start to realize that you are healing root causes with dry fasting. When it comes to cortisol, this is where things get a little bit tricky. I could do a whole 1-hour discussion just on cortisol. Cortisol is both needed and dangerous. Cortisol helps us break down macronutrients to maintain blood glucose levels in the blood. However, there is always a chance of experiencing something like adrenal stress. If you already have adrenal issues, then long dry fasts should not be your primary concern. Our body has fantastic adaptation mechanisms that will protect us from high cortisol levels if the fast is adhered to correctly. However, this is why it's so important to take it step by step. Someone rushing into dry fasting too quickly can experience metabolic changes, like increased abdominal fat and higher blood pressure, which could have been avoided by approaching it slower and letting the body adapt. Going too far too fast can also lead to anxiety and depression after the fast, especially if your neurological issues are already compromised. I've seen this a few times in extreme cases that involve desperation fasting and rushing into it too quickly. You can also use a smartwatch to monitor your health. You can monitor your heart rate, your sleep quality, and your HRV, which I highly recommend. There are some amazing discoveries to be made about your body and how it reacts to dry fasting. You can even find some of these for under $50, so they won't break the bank. Dry fasting is such a powerful tool. It's literally a miracle maker. But if you don't respect it, it can be dangerous. Another extremely common topic that pops up is gallstones and liver health. Gallbladder and liver health is very important. One of the biggest fears for people on a dry fast is that it may dislodge gallstones, but that's why a gallbladder and liver flush is usually recommended. But actually, you should also be continuously improving your bile production to make sure that no gallstones are forming. If you're worried, you can also do a malic acid preparation, and you can always go and get an ultrasound just to be on the safe side. There's an enormous amount of details that we could talk about, but I can't fit them into this discussion. But remember, dry fasting actually helps all of these detoxification organs. So taking it nice and slow is always recommended. So finally, let's wrap all of this up. Health is very complicated and varies from person to person. A lot of people worship fasting, but to pretend that anyone can do it and that there are absolutely no consequences to it is absurd. There are many people that treat fasting and detox as a challenge and maybe even a bit of a sport, pushing boundaries with experimentation and stretching limits to try and achieve faster results. But it's only something that you should be doing if you fully understand the risks involved. For those unwilling to accept this, you have safer protocols to follow, like 5-day ones and under, kind of like this one. And if you have underlying conditions that put you at a greater risk, you need to start slow and take baby steps. This isn't a sprint, it's a marathon. Start with water, then very small dry fasts. Assess each one, assess your nutrient levels, learn from it, and take appropriate action. I wish you the very best and good luck on your healing journey. Thanks for sticking around. If you've dry fasted before, have any questions or requests for future topics, please leave them in the comments below. I always check the comments for inspiration and ideas. If you're looking for a chat or to set up your dry fasting plan, check out the dryfastingclub.com website and subscribe. You should also check out the Discord community where you can meet other new and experienced dry fasters. Remember, no two people are the same, so every fasting experience is unique. Thank you and good luck on your dry fasting journey.